We're excited to celebrate our 150th episode of Breaking Sales. Honestly, when I first started doing the podcast back in 2020, I never thought we would be reaching 150, but here we are today. It's been a long journey, and to celebrate this milestone, we are welcoming two very special guests for a discussion on the psychology behind high performance. Dr. Eric Potterat, a leading performance psychologist who has worked with everyone from professional athletes, recently the Dodgers, to Navy SEALs. He's been one of my personal mentors and a coach of mine for years. Eric's book, Learn Excellence, Mental Disciplines for Leading and Winning from the World's Top Performers, came out earlier this year. His co-author, Alan Eagle, is a former managing director at Google and an executive communications consultant. This is our first of 3 episodes to be released. What I love about this conversation with Eric and Alan is the comfort of knowing that high performance is something that all of us can learn. I think too often in our lives, we look around and we do comparisons on how we stack up and compete with others. And in that analysis, how many times have we chalked up someone else's success or achievement or performance to just natural skill, or simply maybe they were born that way? Learned excellence is our ability to take one moment and day at a time. It's the moment when you're exhausted and your calendar shows that you're supposed to be sending out 10 more intro emails, and then you need to go to the gym. Do you do it, or do you brush them both off? It's that decision you make to start reading one page every day in that book that you've let sit next to your bed month after month. It's experimenting with routines, skills, and/or actions and not worrying about being perfect. In this episode, Eric shares some stories in psychology about how to stop focusing on outcomes and start focusing on the process and incremental progress. We also get into powerful additional topics like adversity tolerance, internal conviction, and balance and recovery. If you're ready to start taking the mystery and that awful feeling of intimidation out of the idea of high performance, this episode is a fantastic starting point. Let's jump in. So welcome, both of you. All right. I know you guys got up early for this, so I appreciate that. And so does our audience. Why don't you guys give a little background first here this morning? For our audience, by the way, we are talking to Dr. Eric Potterat and Alan Eagle, authors, fantastic book, Learned Excellence. I will share that Doc is one of my mentors and coaches as well. So I think, Doc, how long have we known each other for?
Oh, man, 7 years or something? I think it's been a while, 7.5 years. Yeah.
I don't want to take up too much of the listeners' time, but I remember when we first met, we were down at the Fort Lauderdale airport. That's right.
Yeah.
Some poor guy had Dr. Eric Potterat's name up, and he had Dan Lappin's name up. And I just told the guy, I said, "Hey, you forgot the PhD Dr. Potter in my name." So
that's awesome.
Whichever one you guys, Alan, would you like to kind of lead us off? Just a little background.
Sure. Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me this morning. I'm Alan Eagle. I'm a consultant and an author and a coach. And I've spent my entire career, over 4 decades, here in Silicon Valley. I worked for 5 different startups, and then I joined Google about, I guess it's about 18 years ago. I spent 17 years at the company in a variety of sales and communications roles. And then currently, as I said, I do communications consulting and coaching. And Eric and I met, I don't know, Eric, I guess it was about 3 or 4 years ago when Eric came and gave a talk at Google. And it was a really interesting talk about it, or Learned Excellence. And I connected with him afterwards. And I said, that was fascinating. Would you like to write a book? And we spent a day together and decided that seemed like a pretty good idea. So here we are.
You get to take some of this credit then in terms of you got the book started and got the book done with him. So you got him to actually write the book.
Well, a very small amount of credit. Most of this work is, of course, Eric's, but I had written a couple of other books. I wrote a book called How Google Works. I should say co-authored a book called How Google Works about the management principles of the company, which I co-authored with a couple of other executives, and a book called $1 Trillion Coach, which was about Bill Campbell, who's one of the preeminent executive coaches here in Silicon Valley. So I was looking for another project, and Eric had so much interesting material, and here we are.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Doc, how about you?
First off, Alan is he's very humble. He's a genius. He's the one that pushed this over the finish line for sure. I had said no many times, too many times to writing a book, and Alan was very convincing and just a beautiful person, beautiful mind, all of that. So, my name is Eric Potterat. I got a PhD in clinical psychology, and then I joined the Navy. I did my what I guess you'd think of as a residency, or we call it an internship in the Navy. I did 20 years in the Navy. Didn't think I would stay active duty. The last 10 of those years, I was the head psychologist for the Navy SEALs, and that was a heck of a ride. Retired from the Navy as a commander in 2016. Then took, frankly, a dream job with the Los Angeles Dodgers, kind of in their front office as a director of specialized performance programs, where I was responsible for assessment, selection, development, enhancement, similar processes to my role with the SEALs. I stayed with the Dodgers for about 7 years before, frankly, the travel was tough. I decided to kind of hang it up and retire, and just have a really cool 32-year career, being able to talk to great people and meet great people. And we decided to kind of put everything together between the military, athletic performers, and business performers, et cetera. So yeah, it's been a heck of a ride for sure.
Am I allowed to ask? Did you you got your ring too, didn't you?
Did, yeah. We won a shoulda, woulda, coulda, right? I shouldn't say that, but we probably should have won 4 during that 7-year period. I think we were the best team in baseball for at least 4 of those years. Ended up finally closing the deal in 2020. So, but yeah, I got that ring for sure. It was fun. So
Nice. Well, let's jump in. So the obvious question is, what was the impetus and the catalyst for Learned Excellence? When you guys sat down and started talking, what was it that you were like, okay, we need to get this message out. We need to get this content, these observations. We need to write a book so others can really dive into this topic. So catalyst.
Yeah, maybe I'll take that one, and then I'll volley it over to Alan's perspective as well. So, as I stated, a 32-year career, I think roughly about 25,000 encounters with incredible performers. Literally, I'm a nobody, and I mean that. I was just in the right place at the right time, being able to talk with and work with the most incredible performers in the military, I think first responding community, athletics, business, medicine, law, and really about halfway through my career, I just had this epiphany that all of these incredible performers, what makes them the best in the world is mostly learned. And I got so tired, frankly, Dan, of this narrative that I was hearing just in the public that I can never do what he or she is doing because they were born that way. And I just became increasingly frustrated, to be honest, and was doing corporate talks and continuing to kind of work my career. And then I met this man and we just kind of gelled. Frankly, he sent me The $1 Trillion Coach. He FedExed it, a fantastic book that he co-wrote. And I liked his writing style a lot. And he flew down to San Diego, and we just hung out in my backyard, and we started to kind of theoretically architect, put a framework together on what it might look like. And it was great. That was the impetus. Frankly, I mean, if I gave this just one quick statement, it was my increasingly frustrated attitude with this narrative of I can never be excellent. I can never do what these world-class performers are doing. And when you unpack, and I'm sure we'll get into that, when you kind of look under the hood at who they are and what they've experienced, it's all learned. No one's born with anything. So anyhow, Alan.
Before we hear from Alan, that's good news for me and most of us, because I don't know if any of us are really born, right, with any kind of like true high performance DNA, right? It's all about what you learn along the way and how you apply that learning. So again, good news for the rest of us, I guess.
For sure. I mean, I think clearly there's some genetic, physical things that make people have advantages or allow people to have advantages, like that, the proverbial giraffe is going to reach fruit higher on the tree than the elephant. I'm not going to do well in the NBA. But when you look at a lot of people with that hardware, and we'll talk about hardware and software later, there are plenty of people with incredible hardware who don't become excellent. And there's a reason, right? It's the software piece. It's what's between their ears.
Well, and I also think that, people think of performers as a different class. Like, okay, those are performers. I'm not a performer. And this is our thesis, is that everyone is a performer, and you perform, you perform at your job. You perform with your family as a parent or a child or a partner. You're performing all of these realms. And we feel like most people want to get better, but they sort of just settle for their mental state. They just, whatever they have happened to develop, that's what they've got. And this was this is the aha of the book, is that, like Eric said, no, excellence is learned. And if Steph Curry can learn it, or Shohei Ohtani can learn it, so can the rest of us.
Do you find, or have you found, that that can exist at any point in someone's life/career, right? Where, so, I would probably say I'm in the third quarter of my career from a time frame standpoint, right? And so then you have other folks who are maybe in the first quarter from a time frame standpoint. Have you guys seen that it doesn't matter? It's just a mindset. It's all about how far you want to go in something, and you could always be evolving.
I do think, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I do think it has a lot to do with mindset, has a lot to do with, why now, what are the motivators, et cetera. And I think when people, I think there's an advantage that wiser people have, meaning the older we become, I think in general, we start to care less and less, hopefully, about what others think. So there are some advantages when you kind of peel off that armor and you just are open to, okay, what is it I want to accomplish? What am I thinking? What is my identity as opposed to reputation? So while I do think that anyone can do it, I mean, when you look at the world's best performers, and Alan and I think talked about this nicely in the book, they just are tending to accelerate what most people are going to do anyhow. And they're going to double and triple down on their identity over reputation as they age and stage. I do think, to answer your question directly, it is a mindset. It is about making the commitment to doing certain things. And the earlier someone does that, I think the more dividends are going to be paid.
We tell several stories. What really struck me about the process of writing this book is that Eric and I talked to 35, 36 people that Eric had worked with, athletes, ex-Navy SEALs, business leaders. And almost all of them had some sort of story where they had to experience some sort of failure, and they had to change their mindset. They had to change their attitude, their effort, their behavior. They had to address that. Now, I guess most of them were probably younger when they did that, but there's no reason that this has to be age-based at all. It's simply it's just a willful act. No, I made a mistake. I'm going to change something. I've got, in a lot of cases, it was people. We talked to a gentleman, David Colturi, a cliff diver from Red Bull, who would get up at the top, about to dive 100 feet into the water, and start thinking about, what are all those people thinking about me? Thinking about his reputation. And, he had to overcome that. And, we have a few stories like that. So what struck me is that these people are already very high performers, and they're dealing with the same stuff that everybody else does. And it's not age-based. I think what does happen as you get older is maybe you just get more complacent. You think, well, I can't change that. And maybe it's a little harder, but no, you can. And that's really our point.
I love that point, Alan, because it is, right? It's about how you think. And it's like, okay, is my next best version of myself still out there, right? And what can I do to get to it? What can I do to untap it, right? I love that. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you, Alan, is the $1 trillion coach. We brought it up twice. Premise for that, when you wrote that book or co-wrote that book, what was that about in terms of what were you trying to communicate to the reader?
Well, the book was about a gentleman named Bill Campbell, who was perhaps the preeminent executive coach of all time, certainly here in Silicon Valley. He was the coach to the entire leadership team at Google from roughly 2001 until 2016, when Bill passed away. And that was to the CEO, Eric Schmidt, and several people on Eric's staff. And of course, during that time, Google went from a scrappy little startup to one of the most valuable companies in the world. He had been the lead sales executive at Apple in the 80s when they launched the Macintosh, and was a close confidant for Steve Jobs through all those years. So imagine a guy who was the executive coach to Steve Jobs and Apple's senior staff, and Eric Schmidt and Google's senior staff at the same time. He must have something going on. So we wrote that book after Bill passed away, sort of as a tribute to Bill. And much like Learned Excellence, we wrote it because we thought there was some unique insights there that that people could learn from and hopefully become better leaders. And the insight with Bill was that leadership is a combination of management, coaching, and love. And because people talked about love all the time when they talked about Bill. And so, we try to capture those principles in the book and express how people to become great leaders. Sometimes you're a manager, sometimes you're a coach, and always you're supporting your team with loyalty and love.
And obviously, he did an amazing job of the three. He balanced them quite well, especially given the audience he coached, right? The clients that he had.
Yeah, and he had a pretty remarkable background himself. He was a sports coach. He was a football coach in college football for about 12 years after he got his master's degree. And then he switched over to a business career where he rose to become the CEO of Intuit and other companies. And then he started his executive coaching career. So pretty remarkable background. Bill was a remarkable guy. And we can get into this, but I think there's a lot of overlap between the insights of personal excellence, which we talked about in Learned Excellence, and cultural excellence, and what makes great companies great. I think there's a lot of the same principles there.
Yeah, one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys, so we could kind of dive deep into it, like you said, Alan, is when you think about high performance, and you both have seen a lot of it, how would you define it? Again, right? There's no one definition, fully understood, right? And I could ask 10 different experts that question and probably get 10 different answers. I know that. But when you guys think about all these observations that you've made, the research that you've done, the experiences that you've had, how would you guys define high performance?
I think there are a lot of fantastic definitions out there, but for me, if I were to kind of titrate all of those down into with the proverbial crucible, for me, I think high performance is a relentless pursuit of incremental improvement. I don't think it's about the score as much, and people, I think, get seduced by the wrong thing. I think they score often, whether it's the amount of money you have in the bank, the number of businesses you acquire, the number of wins, what happens on the battlefield, again, all have different contextual importance. But for me, I think it is really, when you look at high performance over many, many verticals, it is the best performers are in this constant, relentless pursuit of incremental improvement. They don't, as Alan said earlier, I don't think they get seduced by complacency. They are immunized against it. Like, hey, I don't need to be the best overnight. I'm just going to put forth a recipe and stay consistent with that recipe and continue to try to improve various aspects of whatever it is, husband, father, business executive, athlete, et cetera. So that would be my.
I was going to ask you, does the stage even change, right? So the stage changes because it could be, hey, this is what I do at this time in my career, but this is my new career over here, right? Different stage or different role, responsibility, husband, friend, right? Or whatever it might be.
Exactly. So I think, and I'll let Alan answer here in a second, but I think one of the things we were extremely mindful of within the book was we interviewed some incredible human beings. I mean, literally best gold medalists, CIA, Navy SEALs, but we also didn't choose necessarily all the sexy performers. We tried to choose, I don't offend any of the performers in the book, but a ballroom dancer, an assistant district attorney, a police officer, really tried to look at multiple pillars and really have them make our case for us through their stories, that it really doesn't matter what you do. As Alan said, we're all performers. They're all performers. What makes them unique is this learning from micro failures, being able to pivot and really trying to have this relentless pursuit of incremental improvement. So I'll shut up, Alan.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Dan. When you asked that, I thought, oh, we never heard that one before. I might take a slightly different approach, and maybe this is just semantics. I would define performance as always achieving to the best of your potential. Eric talked about the incremental improvement. I think that's how you get to performance, is through incremental improvement. So like I said, mostly that's probably semantics, but I think everyone's got a potential. Everyone has the very best they can be in the multiple aspects of their life, their home life, their community life, their work life. And I think when you're truly performing, you are always achieving to that potential, the very best that you think, not that you think to be, the very best that you can actually be. And, the nice thing about that is I'm not sure we ever get there. That's where the relentless improvement comes in.
That's a great definition, actually, gentlemen. I wrote some notes down on it. So diving into that, I know, right? It's cliche. Hey, what are the top 10 attributes, right? Characteristics or whatever it is of high performance. I'll let you guys share. It could be the top 3, the top 5, but what are some of those top attributes? I mean, our listeners are listening to this and they're going to want to know, like, okay, so if I really want to go on this journey and I want to see what I'm made out of and how far I can take my performance in whatever field, career, channel, or avenue I go, what are some of those core fundamentals that I really got to start being aware of and work on?
Well, I'll start, Eric, with just give an overview of the 5 mental disciplines that we describe in the book. And then I will let Dr. Eric dive into whichever he wants to. But we have five disciplines: values and goals. So the best performers operate off of a clear set of values. They're intrinsic motivators rather than extrinsic motivators. Their reputation. They set big goals. They choose and activate the right mindset for every role. They focus on process, not outcome. They practice adversity tolerance. So they understand and practice how to handle stress and adversity in the moment. And then they actively invest in both balance and recovery. So those are the 5 disciplines. And Eric, take it from here.
Can I ask a quick question, Alan, if you don't mind? Sorry, Doc. Talk a little bit about the intrinsic values versus extrinsic.
It's identity, not reputation.
Right. We've talked, that's come up a couple times already. Yeah.
So what I find interesting about that is, the best performers are motivated by whatever their internal values are, what they care the most about. And they learn to ignore external factors, all the chatter, all the stuff they can't control. But what I find interesting about that is a lot of people don't really understand their values. They don't, they think they know who they are. And Eric talked about, the wisdom that comes with age, where hopefully as we get older, we have a clearer idea of who we are. Not always, but hopefully. So when you say focus on identity, not values, it's important. Identity, not reputation. It's important to really understand what that identity is. And we have a process and exercise that Eric works with his clients on for helping people develop their values credo, which is literally a set of 10 to 12 words that get at the core of who you are. And that becomes a useful practice and then a tool that people have so that when they find themselves getting distracted by and worrying about reputation, they can re-anchor on identity.
I'm reflecting on my own career, Alan, as you're talking, right? And all the coaching I've done as well. But when I reflect on myself, right? Boy, I bet you there's no doubt when I was younger, my decision-making was based on reputation. I don't know if that's normal or not, but I can look back and think about why I made certain decisions. What was I trying to validate? What was I trying to create? But it was all external. Do you guys find that pretty common? Then as you start getting a little bit more mature, experienced, and older, it does start to shift to identity? Or does that shift have to actually be something that's decisive? It has to be specifically with intent.
I'll take this one. So when you look at the literature, it's most people roughly between the ages of 35 to 40, and I'm not a developmental psychologist, so I'll refer or defer to them. But generally speaking, again, as we age in stage, we start to hit that, I don't want to call it midlife, but 35 to 40 is you're entering a different stage on, how much runway you have left. And generally speaking, people are caring less and less about what others think. As they even get older, think of grandma or granddad. They don't care what they wear. They don't care what people think. It's kind of beautiful if you think about it. I think that there's an intentionality here, though. When you look at the best performers, the irony of something that you just said, Dan, is that most of us, I think Alan would agree, I was the same. I wanted to be a good psychologist. I cared about what my clients thought. I think it's normal to be young and eager and really be reputationally focused. The irony is, however, if you focus on identity and you can identify those values, or what we call in the book identity markers, and you use those as a lens, or the metaphor we used as a compass, that's the true north, and you make decisions based on those identity markers or values, the irony is your reputation follows. We have yet to meet anyone. I mean, we did these interviews for the book, but I've thousands and thousands of interviews, and I've never asked someone to write their credo where they say, hey, I want to cheat, I want to be manipulative, I want to exploit, I want to be an ass, whatever it is. I've never seen someone with those values yet. So it really is kind of that switch in the mind, or I need to start focusing on myself and the reputation will follow.
And I mean, to sidetrack us on that, we see so many young folks who are very driven, and it's just curious for them to be thinking about, even to this day, right? Because I wish back when I was 20 or 30 that I had this type of knowledge where I'm like, okay, am I making this based out of reputation or identity? I would have loved it. I think it would have advanced my career even faster.
As we conclude this episode of Breaking Sales, I want you to consider this. What does excellence look like to you? Hopefully your thoughts are turning and you feel some empowerment and some excitement after listening to Eric and Alan talk about the 5 mental disciplines for excellence. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about giving yourself a chance through consistency. 12 months from now will look and feel so much different if you can take an incremental approach. And we've only started scratching the surface with what Eric and Alan have to offer and what they'll share. Over the next 2 episodes of Breaking Sales, we'll dive deeper into that 5 mental disciplines they outlined in their book, Learned Excellence, and explore practical ways to apply these ideas in your daily life and career. Thank you for being a part of our 150 episodes, and we hope you continue to choose to be a part of our journey. We'll see you next week for part 2 with Dr. Eric Potterat and Alan Eagle, where we'll examine tools and techniques top performers use to find motivation and focus on their goals. If you want to connect with Eric or Alan, they are both on LinkedIn, or you can visit learnedexcellence.com. If you enjoyed this episode, you can follow us on your preferred streaming platform. And if you choose, leave a review. You have many options to listen to. We appreciate the time that you spend with us, and we would value your feedback on Apple Podcasts.